One quiet afternoon, a young boy named Alk was fishing by the lake when a strange man suddenly appeared and asked if he'd like to learn magic. The offer sounded too good to refuse. From that day on, Alk spent his days training with Eldest, a wise mage who took him under his wing. One day, Eldest was teaching Alk how to use fire magic, something he said might one day help him protect others. It was tougher than what Alk was used to, but after hours of practice, he finally managed to get it right. He felt a bit disappointed that it took him an entire day to master it. But Eldest reminded him that most people need a whole month to do what he accomplished in a single day. Alk should be proud of himself, he said. Still, Alk wasn't satisfied. He wanted to learn more and asked Eldest to keep teaching him. But the old man laughed and said they'd trained enough for the day. Instead, he suggested they do a little fishing before Alk went home. Alk agreed, though reluctantly he was eager to grow stronger as quickly as possible. Eldest chuckled and told him he had incredible talent for magic. Even if Eldest hadn't trained him, he believed Alk would have become an exceptional mage on his own. That made Alk wonder if that was true. Why did Eldest bother teaching him at all? Eldest smiled faintly, about to explain, when suddenly a fish tugged on the line. The question was forgotten, as the two focused on reeling it in together. The next day, their training continued. This time, Eldest brought along a magic book for Alk to study. To Alk, it was confusing, like when people started adding letters to math. It took him a while to understand, but over the next few months, Eldest patiently explained the magical formulas to him until Alk finally began to grasp them. By the following spring, during their usual training session, Eldest brought some bad news. He had to leave the capital and wouldn't be able to train Alk anymore. Before he left, he gave his student a warning. Alk had enough talent to become a court magician, but if anyone ever offered him that position, he should refuse. "It's not worth the trouble," he said. As Eldest turned to leave, Alk stopped him with one final question. Why had he chosen to teach him in the first place? Eldest smiled gently and revealed that Alk's mother had once done him a great kindness. Teaching Alk was his way of repaying that debt. Years passed. Alk became a student at the Royal Academy. One day, while flipping through an old yearbook, he found Eldest's name. As expected, Eldest had been the Academy's top graduate and later became a court magician till he was banished from the kingdom. That must have been why he left Alk all those years ago. Determined to honor his teacher's legacy, Alk decided he would become a court magician himself to restore Eldest's reputation and prove his worth. Unfortunately, that was the one thing Eldest had told him never to do. Not long after, Alk's story repeated his mentors. He joined a hero's party led by Crown Prince Regulus, alongside a mage named Lenny and a knight named X during a mission. Regulus suddenly announced that Alk was fired. Shocked, Alk asked why. Regulus arrogantly explained that he was meant to fight on the front lines. Lenny's job was to push enemies back with her spells, and X was there to defend them. Meanwhile, Alk only cast support magic like barriers and enhancement spells. Too pathetic, the prince said. For a member of the hero party, Lelk tried to argue, saying support magic was vital for the team's safety, but Regulus cut him off. The truth was, Alk had never even wanted to join the party. He was ordered to by royal command after becoming a court magician. To make matters worse, Regulus had banned commoners like Alk from carrying weapons, afraid they might outshine him, despite everything. Alk had done his best to make up for Regulus's incompetence. He'd even saved the prince's life more than once. But now, he was tossed aside without a second thought. Still, he tried to help. He wrote down monster attack patterns and strategies to make the prince's next mission easier. When he went to deliver the letter, the castle guard stopped him. They told him he'd been stripped of his court magician title and could no longer enter. Moments later, Lenny appeared just to mock him. She had always been jealous of him since he broke the Academy's dungeon record and became famous. She sneered, tore his letter to pieces, and ordered the guards to throw him out. 4 years had passed since Alk graduated and became a court magician. He had tried his best to reform the corrupt imperial court, but in the end, he couldn't change anything. One day, while walking along the canal, he heard a familiar voice call his name. It was Yora, an old friend. She ran up and hugged him tightly, relieved to see him again. As they sat down to talk, Alk told her everything that had happened. Yora grew furious, cursing the kingdom for how it treated commoners. Alk told her to calm down before anyone overheard, but she brushed it off, saying no one else was around. She felt sorry for what he'd been through, but was glad he was finally free from the prince's party. Now, she said, he could start fresh, and invited him to join her own dungeon-clearing party. Alk hesitated, wondering if she really wanted someone like him. But Yora smiled and said she knew better than anyone how powerful he was. For the first time in a long while, someone recognized his worth. Tears welled up in Alk's eyes. He stood, smiled, and agreed to join her. The next morning, they set out together for the city of Fisazel. Along the way, Alk remembered Eldest's warning about staying away from the imperial court. Maybe things would have been easier if he had listened, but it was too late now. The path ahead was his to forge, and he was finally ready to walk it. Back in the capital, Regulus had just learned that Alk had left the city and immediately dismissed him as a pathetic excuse for a mage. He'd only forced Alk to join his party because everyone raved about the boy's talent. But he hated having a commoner on the team. Now that Alk was gone, Regulus was relieved. Lainey chimed in, saying they could finally replace him with someone of pure noble blood. Without Alk holding them back, she insisted, Regulus would become famous for clearing a dungeon faster than anyone else. A few days later, Alk and Yora arrived in the city of Fisazel. Yora enthusiastically described how great the city was. No discrimination against commoners, and a perfect base for an adventuring party. Realizing Alk wasn't registered as an adventurer yet, she led him to the guild to start the process. Inside, however, they ran into a problem. The receptionist told Alk he didn't qualify for a special license required to enter dungeons. Above level 30, to get the license, he would need to be registered with the guild for at least 2 years. Yora asked if an exception could be made, but the receptionist explained the rules couldn't be broken. Yora was frustrated. She had sent her friend Kesha ahead to request special permission, but Kesha had been rude to the receptionist. Ensuring they wouldn't receive any favors, Yora was disappointed because her party had already reached the 52nd floor of the dungeon, meaning they couldn't advance with Alk until he earned his license. Accepting the situation, she suggested they focus on the areas he was allowed to explore for now. There was still plenty of ground to cover. She wanted him to enjoy the experience. Later that day, Alk and Yora entered one of the dungeons and immediately faced a swarm of red hornets. Yora cast enhancement magic on him, so he could take down a few, but it barely made a dent in their numbers. She couldn't understand why level 2 had become so difficult. But Alk suspected the hornet nest had been disturbed. Causing their frenzy, Yora raised a defensive shield and charged into the swarm. But Alk warned her to stay back and handle the hornets methodically. She reminded him of his old self. Before he became a court magician, he had been unstoppable against swarms like this. Realizing he didn't have to hold back to protect the prince's ego anymore, Alka unleashed his full power, burning several hornets with fire magic. Regrouping with Yora, he cast a wide-area thunderbolt spell, clearing the rest. Just when it seemed the fight was over, a giant earthworm burst from the ground. Grabbing Yora, Alk realized this must have been why the hornets were acting so aggressively. He needed to act fast. Checking with Yora, he confirmed her defensive magic was still strong. She asked if his attack magic was as potent as she remembered, and they trusted each other completely. Alk cast a fire tornado, engulfing the worm in flames. Yora's shields protected her, and once she was safe, she praised his magic and eagerly suggested meeting the rest of the team for some fun. Just like old times, before graduation, Alk had been part of a legendary student team. Ornis, the genius warrior. Krizia, the genius archer. Yora, the genius support mage. And Alk, the genius attack mage. On graduation day, they had set a new dungeon record by clearing the 68th floor, earning top ranks at the academy. But as they discussed the future, Alk revealed he intended to become a court magician. His friends were disappointed, especially Ornis, who knew that together, they could have formed the strongest adventuring party ever. Still, they respected Auk's decision. Yora, however, promised she would recruit him the moment the chance arose. Back in the present, Yora officially welcomed Auk to her party. To celebrate, she treated him to a hearty dinner, but soon became drunk, collapsing in her seat after a single mug of beer. Auk used magic to cover her with his jacket so she wouldn't catch a cold. Suddenly, a man appeared behind him, commenting on Auk's thoughtfulness. Auk assumed he was just a random drunkard and ignored him. Annoyed, the man swung his bottle at Auk, shattering it on a magic shield he had prepared. Just as Auk prepared to retaliate, the man called him by name and slid a dungeon pass across the table, apologizing for testing him in such a crude way. Auk was confused. It turned out the man was none other than the guildmaster, Yora. Still groggy, asked what the guildmaster was doing there, and Auk learned that he wanted to see firsthand what the former court magician could do. He invited Auk to the training center. Once there, the guildmaster introduced himself as Leviel. Auk remembered stories of him being part of an S-rank party and knew this wouldn't be an easy fight. But it was the perfect chance to sharpen his skills before heading into a dungeon. As the match began, Auk launched a thunderbolt spell, but Leviel dodged and countered with a powerful water slash. Auk realized long-range magic alone wouldn't be enough. He decided to close in for hand-to-hand combat, but Leviel had cast enhancement magic, boosting his speed and strength to incredible levels. Leviel was now moving so fast that Auk could barely follow his movements. When Leviel finally struck, Auk managed to block it with a shield, but the force sent him crashing into a wall. Yora grew concerned, but Auk quickly got up, insisting he was fine. He had been caught off guard by the speed of Leviel's attack, so he began thinking about ways to dodge better next time. Then he laughed, realizing he could do more than just dodge. Under the prince's command, Auk had always been restricted in combat, forced to stay on the defensive. But as an adventurer, he was no longer limited to evasion and support magic. He infused his wand with magic to create a sword and charged forward. Leviel responded with another water attack, but Auk easily slashed through it. Leviel was impressed, but confident Auk wouldn't be able to handle his punches. He enhanced himself and charged, only to be hit by Auk's well-prepared counter, a full-force thunderbolt spell, leaving him wide open. Leviel was astonished to have actually been struck, and could now understand why Yora praised Auk so highly. The test wasn't over. Leviel activated an ancient artifact, summoning massive gauntlets capable of leaving huge craters with a single punch. Auk knew one hit could be devastating, but he refused to give up. He launched another thunderbolt, but Leviel's artifact allowed him to heal over time, making prolonged attacks dangerous. Auk tried to prevent Leviel from healing, striking repeatedly, but none of his attacks landed. Frustrated, Auk taunted Leviel, questioning if he was afraid to face him head-on. That got under Leviel's skin, prompting a reckless swing, just the opening Auk had hoped for. He struck Leviel in the stomach, finally dealing some real damage. Leviel charged again, and Auk raised a shield, but it shattered under the sheer force of the punch. Still, it slowed Leviel enough for Auk to land a chest strike. Leviel attempted a hammer fist, creating a massive dust cloud, pushing the limits of what Yora thought a friendly sparring match should be. Despite the onslaught, Auk maneuvered behind Leviel and delivered a final strike, draining the last of his energy. Leviel collapsed, unconscious. Yora rushed to Auk's side, checking on him. Leviel admitted he had overdone it this time, and declared Auk the true victor. Ornis arrived shortly after, shocked to find Auk had been dueling Leviel. He scolded Leviel for using his ultimate artifact in a friendly spar, but Leviel shrugged, saying he got carried away. Satisfied Auk had proven himself, Leviel confirmed he could have a dungeon pass and anything else he needed, provided he promised not to sue. Auk was still unconscious, so the group carried him inside and laid him on a couch to rest. By now, everyone had heard the story of the injustice Auk endured as a court mage. It was remarkable that he had survived so long in a castle filled with elitist nobles who despised commoners. Just then, the receptionist barged in, bringing bad news. Leviel excused himself to handle it, leaving the others to watch over Auk, but with strict orders not to touch his alcohol collection. Of course, Ornis immediately went for the most expensive bottle, planning to annoy Leviel later. Ornis asked Yora to fill him in on Ox time as a court mage. There was a lot to cover. Alk had been tasked with protecting the prince, but was forbidden from carrying a sword, or using any magic that might make him seem stronger than the prince. He also had to manage the party's luggage and items. Worst of all, he was forced to rely solely on support magic, only to be called useless by the prince. Ornis was shocked. Alk's specialty was attack magic. Yora explained that Alk had learned support magic just to appease the prince, despite it not suiting him when Alk woke. Ornis suggested they put the dungeon raid on hold and go confront the prince for all he'd put Alk through. Alk asked him to calm down, saying he wasn't angry enough to do that himself, but Ornis was more than willing to act on his behalf. Alk reassured him that as long as he could adventure with his friends, he didn't care about revenge. Karma, he believed, would take care of the prince eventually. Ornis loved the idea and said they just needed to become the world's greatest adventurers. When word reached the castle, the prince would regret ever kicking Alk out, and they could enjoy watching him squirm. Alk grinned, fist-bumping Ornis, promising they would become the strongest party together. Meanwhile, in another room, an S-rank adventurer was being bandaged as she recounted a failed mission to Leviel. She requested a rescue team for her trapped teammates. Leviel called an all-hands meeting, but due to short notice, only the adventurers present at the guild could join. They were tasked with rescuing her party from level 64 of the dungeon, a notoriously dangerous floor. While the meeting went on, Alk sat alone in Leviel's office, battered and exhausted. Kra arrived and immediately noticed his injuries, asking why he was there instead of attending the meeting. Alk said he didn't want to intrude. He still felt like an outsider among errant adventurers. Kra used restoration magic to heal him and reassured him that no one would ever treat him as an outsider here. Alk had spent 4 years as a court magician learning not to stand out, avoiding conflicts with pretentious nobles. Breaking that habit wasn't easy. Krazea noticed and patted him on the head, telling him she was always there to help. It made Alk feel much better. Soon, Ornis and Yora returned with news. They had the perfect excuse to head into the dungeon. Ornis explained their next mission, the Tank Killer, a dungeon where all healing magic was nullified, forcing reliance on potions. Alk was concerned, knowing this neutralized one of Krazia's specialties, but she had been persuaded to accept the mission as a starter challenge. Alk worried he might not be strong enough to contribute, but Yora reassured him he was the backbone of the operation. Without his magic, the mission would fail. And with that, the team prepared to venture in, ready to face whatever dangers awaited them.